Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Troy Graham from Oz Development. Today we are talking about improving inventory control by leveraging containers and license plates within a NetSuite framework. Just as we go ahead and get started, everybody that's on the webinar today, you are on mute. So if you have questions, you can use the chat feature inside of the webinar, and we will do our best to answer questions as we go, as well as we'll have some time at the end where we can get any questions answered. So please take advantage of that chat window. But here's a quick agenda for us, and with this in mind, we're going to go ahead, jump right in, and talk a bit about license plates, containers, how they're leveraged in NetSuite, what some of the options are for NetSuite customers, and talk about some real-life examples, and even show a couple of demonstrations a little bit later on today. So, again, my name is Troy Graham from Oz Development. I've been working in the NetSuite space for just over 10 years now, and really focus on working with customers, improving warehouse operations, fulfillment operations is really my core focus. And we're very lucky to have with us John Than from Appficiency. And John, if you'd say hello and introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Troy. Nice to meet everybody on the webinar. My name is John Than from Appficiency. I'm one of the principals and the founder of Appficiency. Appficiency is in the business of providing expert administration to existing NetSuite customers, as well as implementation assistance. I have been working with NetSuite over 7 years, both at NetSuite for 6 years, and then it's 2 years with Appficiency. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for the introduction, Troy. There's a lot of great information that we're going to share to you guys, and you're going to see a great solution with the Oz Development stuff.
Great. And just to add to John's introduction of himself, John is one of the most knowledgeable folks, I think, in the NetSuite space out there. John and I have known each other now, I think, for, gosh, probably 7 or 8 years. So we're very fortunate to have John. He's got a tremendous depth of knowledge, and I always try to think of questions around NetSuite to stump John, and I'm never very successful at it. So he's a great resource for us today. So the main topics that we're going to cover, the main questions we're going to answer today, we're going to talk about how are license plates used in NetSuite. What are some common use cases? How are license plates similar and different to a container? What NetSuite support sort of out of the box? What some requirements you may be hearing from your customers or your suppliers, and why license plating may become more and more important to you? What are, again, some common examples of container management options for use for NetSuite? What are some of the basic benefits of tracking containers and tracking license plates? Ultimately, how do we make some of those things work inside of our NetSuite environment? And then, for any of you that may have joined us on some of the other webinar series that we've been doing, what are the trade-offs with everything that we do as an extension to NetSuite or a customization to NetSuite? What are the pros and cons of making some of those decisions, are what we're going to hopefully discuss and share with everybody today. So, John, maybe you could start off from your perspective. Just talk a little bit about, kind of what is a license plate?
Thanks, Troy. So a license plate, for a lot of folks on the phone, they may not have heard the term. They may have heard the term pallet or different ways of skids as well is pretty commonly used to mean more or less the same thing in the warehouse. A license plate provides the ability to collectively group a bunch of things that don't normally get grouped together, or group them in a unique way for a one-time or a few times type of scenario. So the definition you see on the screen in front of you is quite accurate. It's a license plate provides visibility of the location of a collective group of items, item numbers, and quantities that are physically not in a NetSuite bin. They can also be in a NetSuite bin, but they may not be, and of course they are typically on some type of movable thing, whether that's a pallet, a tote, whether that's some other construct that's used to move a variety of goods. That's really what license plating is for, and it allows single scan, single identification and movement of all those things that are within that skid or within that license plate. That's really the intent of license plating. Now, from use cases for license plating, a lot of companies use this for a lot of different things, but typically license plates are used to receive a bunch of products either on a pallet or in a container. The concepts are very similar, really, if you think about it at the end of the day. And they're used to move that around the warehouse. Sometimes they never even make it into the warehouse. They're cross-stocked, or they're used to collectively take care of break bulk situations. So where you have a variety of goods that are separated, the license plate allows you to temporarily put them together because you're going to ship them together for a variety of reasons. Efficiencies on the shipping costs, efficiencies in the drop-off route, or so on and so forth. Within the warehouse, of course, you use them for efficiencies of movement and efficiencies of getting larger orders ready. Sometimes orders are built up over days, and they include a variety of things. Or sometimes there's several orders because you're working with a large distributor and you need to take it for several different transactions in NetSuite, but you're really representing one shipment or one movement of goods, and that's really what the license plate is for. We have a customer of ours that does skincare products, and they will ship 15,000+ units at a time. Those need to get built up over days. License plating is perfect example of that. They know what's in each skid. They physically slap on a barcode so that that barcode can be moved, and they know what is being moved without recounting every item in the skid. So this is these are some of the common use cases for license plating.
Yeah, and another quick example, John, that I was just thinking of is, we've got a company today where they'll have large wholesale orders that they're processing, and especially around the holiday season, kind of the end of Q4, they're going to have situations where many large retailers are going to be ordering a similar set of SKUs that are specifically designed for holiday sales. So what happens to them is they have a very short window in which they need to make those deliveries to their customers. So they use pallets to move, bulk quantities of these items into essentially a picking line, sort of a staging area for picking. So they can keep track of, we know where all of these special items are, but I can move them in mass because I need to do it very, very quickly.
Perfect, thanks. Thanks, Troy. And that example is a good one. It's wholesalers will use containers and license plates in the same breath, and that's why they're the same. The container is the same concept as the license plate or skid, especially when it comes to NetSuite. You need it to group inventory. You need to move it from place to place with a single action, and that grouped up inventory is not something that you have represented in NetSuite in any way or form. It's not a kit. It's not an assembly item. There's no specific NetSuite equivalent of it. So the license plate handles that idea. Often inventory needs to be owned and containers need to be owned. A lot of people take title at the point of the vendor putting it on the boats when it's still overseas. So because of that, the container really serves the same purpose as a license plate if you assume that the containers you have that are moving across the water are really in a virtual warehouse of their own. And you don't have a lot of options to do this in any other way. If you try to track a container in NetSuite, but you're trying to track inventory without actually having received inventory, it gets very, very tricky to keep it in balance. There's a lot of potential problems because NetSuite really looks at the act of the as the first initiation of the item record in NetSuite. The cost begins to be accrued. Any movement is thereafter tracked. Status and commitment of inventory can be managed then, but none of that can happen until it's actually technically on the books. So the container and the license plate go hand in hand as meeting similar needs to move inventory conveniently, access the details within it, and contain and control the costs that are associated to it too.
And John, just to add to that, one of the things that I hear about from time to time is a company says, just as you described, I need to take ownership of that item when it's on the water, but it's not physically here yet. And so some people have gotten into situations where they're technically receiving that inventory in NetSuite, but they lose that ability to do some sort of validation when the goods physically arrive to say, well, my supplier told me there were 1,000 of this item, but when we actually opened the container, there were 950. So we'll talk about some of those scenarios as we go about making sure you can take ownership that you need to do, but not lose that check and balance of making sure what you think is in that box is inside the box or container once it actually gets there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Troy. And on the next slide, you can see these gaps in NetSuite native functionality are exactly what the Oz development solution package covers. These are the key things that allow a good solution like Oz to come in, make a operational impact, and give you, while leveraging sort of the native capabilities that NetSuite has, putting in the extra pieces where it doesn't, without losing the flexibility of the general platform that NetSuite provides. It's a tricky balance. It's something that I think you can only do if you've been a partner with NetSuite a long time, if you've seen a lot of NetSuite customers and done it a lot of ways. So leveraging that knowledge from Troy's team is ideal for our clients. I think it's a great win for anyone that uses Oz. And you'll notice that the third point I have under the second major bullet is that barcoding is considered the best practice here. Anyone that's doing license plating or doing palletization, they know full well that they can't do it without barcoding. It's a ton of keyboard entry. There's so much room for error. You would be going backwards on accuracy if you try to do it without barcoding. But with barcoding, it becomes very easy and convenient. So I don't know if you want to speak to any of those benefits you've seen, Troy, but this is where all the three things come together: barcoding, containers, license plates.
Yeah, well, actually, John, we got an initial question, so I thought I'd throw it out there, and we can maybe both talk a little bit about it. But the question came in regarding serialized inventory or lot number, and it said we receive large quantities of, in this case, lot-controlled items from our manufacturer, and capturing those lot numbers at receipt is time-consuming, mistake-prone, all of those things that we typically hear about. Can a container, is there methodology for a container ultimately to support lot or serialized inventory as well is really kind of the crux of the question.
Sure thing. I'll go ahead and sort of give my first level response, and then Troy, feel free to add to that. So lot, as much as it's very important to use native NetSuite lot functionality in these types of scenarios. So there, most people ask this question because they're trying to make a trade-off between the lot entry burden in NetSuite and the actual accuracy of having it in a lot. And my response to that is that if you have a good solution on top, then the burden part goes away of the process overhead, but you get all the benefits of the accuracy and the lot control. So, the answer to it is if you don't have lot control early on and you need to put this thing on the water on a container, that's a slightly different scenario, and you can use basically you can use an adjunct field to track the real lot number, and in the meantime assign a NetSuite lot number as a secondary key and keep yours as the primary key. That will allow you to go ahead and accept lot-based inventory before you've actually had a chance to validate the lot. And then on receipt at the actual dock, which would, in the Oz development solution, be a transfer order receipt, that's sort of the best practice on it. Then you can do your final counts, and then you can do the necessary adjustments you need. And you're doing it all with barcoding, so it's pretty quick. So that's kind of my sort of first layer of answer on that from a sort of NetSuite perspective, and what I know is often the trade-off clients work with there. Troy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you have inventory that you've determined needs to be tracked as a lot or serial number, then leveraging containers and license plates and advanced ship notices can be very helpful, so that we're not duplicating that data entry, and that is really that big trade-off. So no, John, I really agree with you. And in a few minutes, I have an example where we can talk about a specific use case there as well. So
perfect. Thanks. So from a process perspective, to understand what's actually happening here, we love to use these 3 swim lanes. What's going on in the physical world, what's happening in the OzLINK solution, what's happening actually in NetSuite to support that, and how the solution enhances what NetSuite does natively becomes very apparent. And it also, for the good and bad of everyone, it also shows how it fills in the little gaps and cracks that NetSuite has around the inventory solutions side. So when you're applying license plating for inbound receipts of any kind, essentially at some point you get notification that your supplier or your manufacturer has shipped goods on your behalf. And so at that time, you may have an advanced ship notice that you're going to receive, deal with, notify, track in NetSuite, etc. Against one or multiple POs. So of course, the supplier and manufacturer do not respect the segregation of transactions you have in NetSuite. They look at the entire thing, they ship the whole thing to you and say, hey, here, you deal with it. So again, this is where you need a solution in place so that you can accept that ASN and then compare against that ASN down the road. So reconciliation against that ASN is very important. The shipment goes into transit. On your side, you don't have someone physically at the, and potentially in the overseas dock doing the counts, obviously. So you need to blind receive this thing and essentially temporarily bring it into your books, but segregate it so that you know full well you're waiting for that inspection time. So that's the blind receive that you see in the middle. And the transfer order allows a couple important things in NetSuite. It allows NetSuite to understand that demand and supply has been accomplished already. It's been accounted for. And what that means is if you're using demand planning with NetSuite, if you're using any kind of supply planning or searching even or reports in NetSuite that support looking at supply and when supply is coming, it will be taken into consideration just as an additional transaction type. Very important. And then that allows you, of course, to see an in-status transit an in-transit status in NetSuite on every inventory item or matrix or assembly type item. So it arrives at receiving dock. From a systems perspective, you complete the receiving. There's your full reconciliation. And then NetSuite, you can go through your bin put away process. So now you've reconciled the details. You have 3 checkpoints on this thing already. The ASN itself, comparing against that in the actual receipts. You have the shipment in transit and comparing the blind receipt against the real receipt. And now you have the final real receipt. And then, of course, from there, now it's a matter of moving the inventory around, and that's where license plating takes over. But really, both actions were technically 2 different forms of license plating. So now the license plate is when you start picking for your goods. You have either variety of orders. The example Troy gave is excellent. Holiday season, often this happens. You only have so many trucks that can come to your warehouse in one day. You want to combine the shipments, so you create a license plate for that, and you build up your orders, ship them out, and then drop them off at separate in separate branches thereafter.
And John,
you want to add anything? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say one quick example I'll mention is we have a company that we've been working with where they have a shared, essentially, receiving dock. So they share this receiving dock, and they're allotted a certain period of time to get that receipt in. And they are a retailer, so they would get small orders very, very frequently. But what ends up happening is those orders sometimes get consolidated by their parent company. So when that pallet lands on the dock, they need to be able to get it off the dock very, very quickly, or they face essentially a penalty, a financial penalty. So in their scenario, leveraging that license plate allows them to get all that inventory off the dock quickly, and it actually, in their case, helps them get it onto the shelf. But their primary target was, let's get rid of those fines or penalties they were receiving. So it's, to me, maybe not the most natural thinking use case of a pallet, but it's like, hey, we've got a shared space. We need to move product quickly, and this is a nice simple way to get them into their account at their location quickly. I do have another question that had come in regard to license plating, and the question was talking about, can I track an individual carton that's on a pallet? And can it be scannable? And the answer is yes. We have to talk a little bit about the use case scenario, but I have a company that we do some work with now where they do a manufacturing process, and ultimately when they're building when they're doing manufacturing runs, they're doing that for a specific sales order. So as items come off the production lines, they'll go into a small container, and then that small container will go into a carton. And so what happens is they'll create, as they fill a carton, they'll create a license plate for that carton, and then that carton will move down the line and later get put onto a pallet. So one of these orders could have 7 or 8 different pallets and, potentially 50 or 100 different cartons. But in that scenario, they're using a license plate to track the carton. So I can look at a carton and say, here's what's in the carton. And then as they get to the packing process, they track what what pallet that carton goes onto. And then ultimately, when they look at their NetSuite fulfillment record, they can see where each item is, what carton it's in, what pallet it's on across a multi-pallet shipment. So that's definitely something that I've got experience with, that we see pretty regularly on the fulfillment side. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't know, John, if anything else comes to mind from your standpoint is in regard to using a carton pallet label in addition to a pallet license plate.
No, I think you answered it quite right, Troy. There's no reason you can't use it in that methodology, and it does happen, of course, all the time. A license plate does not necessarily mean that it's big. It could be medium size or small too.
Perfect.
So as we go through and look at sort of the cross-stock scenario, what you see is that you've had palletized items available. So in a cross-stock scenario, products come, they're never fully received into the warehouse. They're left somewhere in the staging area, somewhere in the receiving/inspection area, and you need to basically add to that order with your particular products. You need to finish fulfilling the order. You need to add in finishing touches, etc. So at that point, that's where you would also benefit from using a license plate, because you can capture all the items that you're adding to it against an entire license plate, update quantity, and then you can move it as well. Most people will have a few locations even near the door. That could be a QA or inspection area. It could be sort of a normal receipt prior to Crossstock, or it could be a Crossstock specifically location, and they'll move it over to sort of the other door to get shipped out, and that action of doing that, there's really no place in NetSuite for that. There's no way to track what's going on there in NetSuite, but it's a full process that needs to occur in the warehouse. So that's where the Oz solution puts in that ability to capture those items, build up the quantity, or finish the order and get it ready for the cross-stock. Either one works fine, and then from there, you have a much more normal or standard process, I guess, of fulfillment, going through pick and pack, and printing the necessary shipping documents, including bill of lading. Often the BOL comes up quite a bit in this type of scenario. So a nice way to continue a cross-dock scenario, make efficiencies at the dock and the door by using the license plate in this scenario as well.
John, one example of that is a company called Lionel Racing. Lionel has a number of different types of distribution that happens in their warehouse facility, where they'll do distribution to me as an end consumer, let's say, in a B2C environment. They also, in their Lionel side of the business, they'll do large wholesale orders. So a couple of areas where they're going to leverage a license plate. One of them I referenced a little bit earlier is I've got certain products that are going to come in very, very high volume, and they need to be staged and ready so that they can be picked and quickly delivered to large retailers. So in one example here, we may have a pallet of goods that will come in, and they're going to a pick line location. So I could have, let's say as an example, 10,000 of a particular item, and at 7 a.m. in the morning, I need to move 1,000 to a picking line because they're going to get fulfilled very, very quickly. But then as that 1,000 quantity gets decreased, I need to be able to get another pallet, and I need to move a high quantity of items very quickly into that pick line so I don't slow down that process. But I don't necessarily have the physical space, to put 2,000 or 3,000 of those items into that picking area. So this is a way where I can leverage a mobile scanner, scan a license plate, quickly move 1,000 of this product from bin A to a specific picking bin in my pick line. So very, very high volume move of large quantities. Another example within the Lionel space is a scenario where on the race car side of the business, where they're selling these die-cast race cars for NASCAR, you may have a situation where, as an example, a driver switches teams or maybe wins a championship, and all of a sudden there is a large quantity of orders for a particular driver's car, a particular paint scheme. So they may get a pallet of 3,000 of a particular driver's car. They want to be able to take that pallet, receive that quantity, and then pick right off of that pallet. So I've got 3,000 orders for one each of this car. Instead of putting those items away, I want to move that pallet right into a high-velocity picking location, pick off that pallet to fulfill these large B2C orders as quickly as possible, because there's been an event, a driver win, a championship win that has driven a higher demand than normal for that particular item. So it's a couple of scenarios, one on a B2C side, one on more of a traditional B2B fulfillment process, where I can leverage a license plate, in this case inside my warehouse, to move inventory at a very high velocity. And here's sort of a bit of that swim lane type diagram, and this is one of the things that we'll show you in our demonstration in just a minute, is how do I create a license plate internally? So we've talked a bit about today, if my products come in and it's tied to a license plate and I've got some advance notice from my supplier that this is what's on this pallet or what's in this box. But a lot of companies will say, when I receive product, I want to build my own license plate. And as John had mentioned earlier, inside of NetSuite, there's not really a concept of a pallet or a license plate type container. But you can leverage technology to essentially create a license plate and then add items onto that container. In my demonstration here, my example here in the middle swim lane, I'm using a pallet, so that once I put products onto that pallet, we can produce a label that identifies what that pallet is, and then I can leverage that mobile scan technology to move an entire group of items from a bin to a bin, or a location to a location, or even to fulfill a sales order or a transfer order or a work order without necessarily coming back and scanning each individual unit or master pack. So it's an area where the license plate is something that can be built internally just as frequently as it's something that you're receiving against and then leveraging throughout your workflow. Does that make sense, John? Any comment there in addition to building your own license plates?
No, the only comment I want to make is, the solution is not only about effectively handling the functional requirement and matching up a process, but it's also about all the little things that come along with it. Printing the labels, printing custom documentation that goes along with it that you want to put as a skid flag or some kind of pallet flag on your license plate. Any other additional labels that you need to print along that go with it, and then of course tracking the movement of something many, many times in NetSuite. You want to have a layer over that, and so this solution is this is the right solution. Let's put it that way. It's the right level of solution for what you want to do. It gives you the functional need, but it also provides all the little pieces that you don't think about that would be another burden to go ahead and try to deal with if you didn't have the printing, the automatic label spit out, and the go ahead and scan on it too. So I wanted to add that in. People often think about just solving the big functional problem first, but there's a whole other layer after that that is also equally important, which is making sure the actual physical pieces of paper are going to be laid out and formatted for what they need.
Perfect. Thanks, John. My slide, there we go. So another example that I wanted to talk about is a company with a very, very different industry, different space, a company called Design Imports. And Design Imports sells a lot of seasonal homewares, products, wrapping paper, that sort of item. And one of the challenges that they faced was in a very seasonal business was managing just space, managing the physical space that they had, and being able to have a handle on where items are and be able to get the right items to the right customers. So what they wanted to be able to do was bring items into their warehouse and quickly build some pallets, move those items, and be able to bring them back into a picking location from a more of a bulk storage type location in a very, very rapid manner. So they wanted to build pallets, move those pallets, and that pallet might be used for fulfillment of an order. It could also potentially be used for an assembly or work order type process. So they had a couple of different scenarios there where they could leverage a license plate, but nothing was really coming into their warehouse with a license plate already embedded in their product itself. Bear with me one second. I was just launching. I was going to jump into a quick demonstration for everybody here. My mobile device didn't actually connect, so bear with me just one second. Hey, John, maybe you could talk just for a minute while I relaunch the mobile device here, just about how you could track a license plate. What are some of the options for being able to track what's contained in a license plate in NetSuite, and how you've seen some people do that?
Yeah, sure thing. I was going to actually say, so the license plate record in NetSuite can sometimes be a dual-layered thing. So from an anatomy of what a license plate record looks like in NetSuite, it's typically one of two things. It's typically a solo record, so there's no hierarchy to the record, or it can be a record that basically with a parent and a child concept, where you could have nested license plates, where one references the other, and you build up within you can build up within a license plate multiple license plates too. For the most part, though, license plate is more or less synonymous with really like a pallet, and so they are often even named after pallets. It's quite common. And if you're going to use a license plate, you should probably name it for container tracking. You should probably name it after the container as well. The sort of the downstream impact of doing that is that it lines up with your ASN if you're on the inbound side. And then on the outbound side, it can also line up again with your ASN on an outbound. So, so thinking about the ASN or the EDI requirement while you're designing your license plate solution is very valuable to make sure that they end up in lockstep. It's, reconciling in NetSuite is probably one of the more advanced things to do and do well. And that reconciliation is where if you not tracked the license plate to match up with an ASN, then it gets a little harder, or at least have several license plates that equate to that same ASN. And then license plates can also have a lot of other fields. There's no need to skimp on the field that you want to track on the license plate, but you do want to make it easy for a mostly barcoded and gun-based staff in the warehouse to be able to execute a new license plate, to start a new one, close out one, and move one. So you only want to have so much information on the license plates that the warehouse needs to use, but of course you can go quite in depth on the record itself should you want to track more details. One of you guys asked about lots. That's a good example where you may want to have a little bit more lot information in the license plate itself as well, in the license plate record.
Great. Thank you very much, John. So we're going to jump out of the PowerPoint for a second and talk about a pretty common scenario that we mentioned earlier, and that's that on-the-water concept, right? So somebody supplier is part of your trading relationship, is that once those products are on the water, you take ownership of them. So in my NetSuite account, I've created a location for my East Coast warehouse, my West Coast warehouse, but I also have an on-the-water location. So a portion of what I want to show you today is how can that inventory item make it into my primary warehouse location through the use of a license plate. Just before I do that, I'll touch on for a minute, when that scenario happens, there's a number of different ways that I can take ownership of that inventory and create that initial receipt into that on-the-water location. So I'm going to describe one example of that, and John, certainly jump in if you have some other examples, because I know there's a number of different approaches in there. But we had a company that came to us and said, I need to take ownership. I receive an ASN from my trading partner, but I don't have a way in NetSuite to go receive that because it crosses many different POs, and it's not always a complete purchase order. So I could have hundreds of line items from PO number 1 and hundreds of line items from PO number 2, but not a complete purchase order contained within that ASN record. So what was happening was a big Excel spreadsheet, and somebody was going through line by line and doing that receipt against those individual purchase orders, which was time-consuming and an easy opportunity for making mistakes. So in their scenario, what we did is we actually gave them the ability to type in a container number or an ASN number. And what OzLINK was going to do is it was going to go look at a custom record inside of NetSuite that contained all of the ASN information. And what we would do is we'd look at a line item by line item basis and create purchase order receipts against those specific line items for those specific purchase orders, and automatically receive that inventory item into an on-the-water location. Once we did that, the next challenge was they really wanted an efficient way to be able to get those inventory items physically counted when they landed at the real warehouse location. So as part of that automation, when we would receive into the on-the-water location, we'd automatically create a transfer order to the appropriate warehouse location. In my example that we'll look at in a minute is the East Coast warehouse. And then we would fulfill that transfer order. So a couple of manual steps were reduced down to a single scan or a single button click. And now all of a sudden, I had a transfer order that accurately reflected what was in that container inbound to my real warehouse location from my on-the-water location. And the nice thing there was anything that I didn't ultimately receive in the warehouse, it was very easy for me to go back and look in the on-the-water location and say, here's my discrepancy. Here's what I didn't receive that we were expecting. But John, I know some companies have done some scripting in NetSuite to create those transfer orders. Any commentary you want to add there, or I'll jump in and show somebody kind of what that looks like on the receiving side.
I just want to add one thing. There are many container and on-the-water solutions. Most will utilize an on-the-water location. Not all do. The major deficiency that other solutions will have is really that they then need to modify or find the correct way to interface their barcoding solution with the on-water functional need. So marrying the two up is an additional product you don't need if you can do both in one shot. And that's really what I think this webinar is about, frankly. I think it's about putting it all together rather than having 4 or 5 disparate pieces that you're trying to make all connect. And someone has a master plan somewhere, and you're worried that that there's a small piece they didn't think of.
Great, thank you, John. So actually, before I start this receipt, let's take a quick look at my my purchase order inside of NetSuite. So here I've got an order, and ultimately I've already created my transfer order. I've created the fulfillment of the transfer order so that my inventory items ultimately are coming from my on-the-water location, and they're going to my East Coast location. So these are items where we've received an advanced ship notice on, And now on my gun, if I log back into my mobile device, I'm in my East Coast warehouse location. I can scan that license plate or ASN label. And in this case, I've got a couple of different labels here. So if I scan the first one here, what OzLINK's going to do is it's going to look at a custom record that contains all of the details and automatically create that receipt in my warehouse location. So in this case, I'm trusting my supplier to have accurately given me an ASN. But if I come back here and I simply refresh my my record, my transfer order record, now we can see with that single barcode scan, these items have been received into my East Coast warehouse location, and they're available for sale. So we start to multiply, whether that license plate that I scanned there was, a carton containing items or a pallet containing hundreds of items, I've got a single barcode scan that brought that entire quantity into my warehouse. So it's a very, very quick process in this case. And you could use a traditional scanning methodology as well, where I break down that pallet and I scan each individual item. But this was a real quick methodology to get that accomplished. One other example that I wanted to just show somebody, I get asked frequently of, let's say I need to build a pallet. What does it look like? And for us, typically there's a couple of steps, right? The first thing is I need to create a pallet, and a pallet really is nothing more than a license plate. It's some unique identifier. Think about it as a serial number, and I need to create a home for that particular pallet. So in this case, I'm going to say my pallet is in bin A01. And so typically I want to create a label, and that label can be printed via a portable thermal printer. It can be printed via a label printer that's plugged into the wall. It's really up to you what's going to make the most sense. But once I've created that foundation, that fundamental pallet record, now I need to build it. I need to put things into that pallet. So if I click Build Pallet, what I want to do is understand what pallet am I working with. And then in my warehouse, I can understand what items do I want to put onto that pallet. So I can scan my item. I can enter or scan my quantity. And I need to also tell the system, where did I get this from? Where are these items coming from? In this case, what I'm doing is I'm taking items from this A01 bin, and I'm putting them onto a pallet, and I'm going to combine them with some other items. So here, we'll scan my second item, and we'll put in my quantity, and we'll say, let's say we took these from B24. Let's say that's my entire pallet content. If I click OK, what OzLINK will do is it will communicate with NetSuite and that custom record, and it's going to verify for me as we go through this process that the quantities that I'm using to do the move are available within the bins that I'm taking them from. But ultimately, inside of NetSuite, we have a couple of things. We can look at that pallet record, and I can look and see, in this case, here is my pallet record, this 98 pallet that I just built, and I can see the contents of that particular pallet at this moment in time. So I still have visibility to the items in their bins. If I look, for example, at this particular item record, oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. If I look at this particular item record, leveraging native NetSuite functionality, I can look at it and I can say, here's where this particular item is. And I'm going to use, like I mentioned, standard bin practices. So those units that I just moved are here in my A01 bin, but I also have access to view that pallet record. So I can scan that pallet and I can say, here's what's on that pallet. To me, it's really, really important that if we do this sort of customization and leverage a custom record to manage a pallet or a license plate ID, that we don't take away that concept of a native NetSuite bin. And I know, as John mentioned earlier, sometimes whether it's lot number based or serial number based, there's that there's that debate, there's that challenge between, do I use the standard capability? Do I not use a standard NetSuite capability? And the approach here is, let's use a bit of both. Let's make sure we don't lose visibility of that item in NetSuite, but let's give us the flexibility to now move that entire pallet, build that entire pallet, fulfill that entire pallet with less physical labor, but not take away from my standard reporting and things that live inside of NetSuite. So again, those were just a couple of quick pieces of functionality around receiving with license plates, building license plates that we wanted to show you to get people thinking about the concept at a high level. But before I move on, John, anything you want to add in regard to what we saw there for receiving or building a license plate?
I do want to add, for a lot of customers, they have other customizations in NetSuite. They have maybe something specific for the order size. They might want to have ship complete rules. They might have credit card charging rules based upon shipment completion and shipment quantity, percentage complete, stuff like that. These can all be done in conjunction with the OzLINK warehouse barcoded solution sort of out of the box. That's the very important thing to think about. It is, you know, we've kind of taken you through how to choose a good solution, how to make sure that you have a good balance between your solution and the native capabilities of NetSuite. And, but then you also have to think about where you're going to extend further in the future. And it's important that native doesn't ever get in the way of the custom, or vice versa, or multiple custom solutions don't collide. So, you know, maturity of system obviously matters, maturity of solution matters, but it's good to look at this and understand that nothing natively is being impacted here. Everything is kind of after one layer up, and so that allows you to continue reliably making the next custom solution you want or the additional automation you need in your business without worrying about whether the native layer is being interrupted by it.
Right.
So just sort of a philosophical discussion on solutioning to add to this this demonstration. I think it's deceivingly simple to do one quick action and make a whole bunch of stuff happen in NetSuite.
Well, and to me, that's really the key to this process, right, John? If we look at something in a silo, it's easy to say, hey, I can solve a problem of building a license plate, but its impact, whether it's with another customization, another NetSuite feature, or as we've seen over the years, a new NetSuite feature that we weren't really thinking about at the time of a solution development, it is really important, and I think that's the expertise that helps make you successful and us successful. So I do want to throw out a couple of questions. We've got a few minutes left here, but one question that had come in was, is the transfer order of a pallet a custom transaction? And the answer is no. The transfer order is a standard NetSuite transaction. Really what we're doing is we're leveraging that license plate or pallet to group a number of products together to help make that move less labor intensive. But it's really important, at least for me, when we look at our solutions and the things that we think are most successful is, no, NetSuite has an end result. I can track that transfer order in NetSuite. I don't have to sort of go outside of the core platform to be able to do that. So to answer that question is, nope, standard NetSuite transfer order, just less effort to get that accomplished by leveraging the license plate. Another question that had come in was in regard to removing items from a license plate. And the answer is yes. If your requirements are to be able to remove items, you certainly can. One example there that I use is there's a company called Free Flow Wines out on the West Coast where they basically have an asset that they own that's a metal container, a metal keg. And when kegs come back, each keg is serialized, and it goes onto a pallet, and that pallet gets moved, and those kegs get cleaned, and then they get sterilized, and then they get filled. But during that process, once kegs are clean and on a pallet and they've been sterilized, they could take 10 of the kegs off of that pallet and fill it with product number 1, and another 10 of those kegs go another direction and get filled with another product. So in their scenario, we build a pallet, we move a pallet, and then ultimately they take kegs off of those pallets and leverage them in different operations. So I know in my example I didn't show taking from a specific pallet, but if that's a requirement you have, it's certainly something you can do. And the way we would leverage that is keeping track of the pallet, or the license plate is a unique record, and items are attached to that or not. And ultimately, whether they are attached to that pallet, those items still will be visible inside of your standard NetSuite bin. So hopefully that answers those 2 questions. I know we talked at the beginning, where we've got just a minute or 2 here left, a little bit about what we do, the customers that we've worked with. But John, I was hoping, because I think it's a really kind of a unique approach, I'm going to jump ahead 2 slides real quickly, and I was hoping you could just talk to people about what you do in a little more detail, and like, how do people, what's the trigger? What are people running into inside their business where somebody like your company would be helpful for them, and hoping you'd spend a minute or 2 and tell us about it.
Sure thing. Thanks, Troy. So the service we offer is typically the kind of customer that comes to us is someone who's either lost a long-time admin at NetSuite, or in their company that used to administer the NetSuite system, or they've just recently acquired NetSuite and they're realizing that there's a very large burden on them to be able to understand the technology before they fully have gotten used to it. Either of those 2 things are probably the main trigger that we see, the customers, and it's often the executives, always know when their NetSuite system has been neglected for a while, because their reports start taking a very long time to generate. And it's not that the system is slow in generating the report, it's that it needs to get massaged and then massaged again, and then someone needs to do that over the weekend, and then a week and a half later after close, they finally get a report. When that starts to happen, then you should maybe consider a little bit more expert guidance and advice on how your NetSuite system is designed. There's always a pace and a time, the right amount and the right pace of change that a company can go through. But certainly from a guidance perspective, when you're in that scenario and you realize that your system is no longer serving you, you're waiting for it all the time, you probably neglected it for a little too long to make sure that the design was correctly done and effectively executed. Certainly, we've seen quite a few customers come to us during the implementation and go live, because that is a tender time while you're building internal buy-in for the change, while people are still trying to figure out how they do their job in the system in the right way. So we're generally a great fit to make sure that you're set up on the right road there. We are the consummate bridge, as they call it, between the technology world and the business world, and so we make it our job to understand the client's business. And where it's appropriate, we will absolutely suggest process change too. Some things can be discussed and executed later. So hopefully that's a little bit about what Appficiency does, why we think we're really important in this space, and we're really excited about working with the NetSuite customers we have and continuing to work with new ones. We think everyone can use a little guidance, and it doesn't take much to make sure that that you guys that purchase NetSuite get the most out of it.
Great. Well, thanks very much, John, and most importantly, thank you everybody for taking the time with us. We'd love any feedback that you have. You will certainly get a copy of the presentation that we used today. We're recording the presentation, so you get a copy of that sent to you. But if you have questions for us, we're happy to talk with you about those at any time. And if you have feedback, one of the challenges with a large group of people in the webinar for me, and everybody not being able to talk sort of freely, is is this a good level of detail? Is it too much detail, too little detail? Would you like to see more demonstration, more customer scenarios? You know, any of that feedback you have, especially feedback that, boy, I didn't like this, is really helpful. You know, our goal as a team is to help sort of promote the NetSuite community and help people get the most out of their solution. And you know, we'd love any feedback, I guess, that anybody has for us. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time. Certainly follow up with us if you have questions. We'll be happy to talk one-on-one in any way that we can help you. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you again, John.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Troy.